Good morning, friends. And on this lovely autumnal morning, we will be having today a day chat and questions from our friend David Saunders, whose title today is Can Solar Power and Meditation Be the Road to Peace? An interesting juxtaposition, I think. David.
Great. Well, I always seem to introduce my talks with the words, when Patsy asked me to come up with a title. I came up with what came to mind at the time, and it's changed a little bit since. But it acts as a sort of little stick to the mind, and I'm thinking, how am I going to turn that into a talk? What's going to happen? And sometimes I get started and I start making slides, and it all comes together in one way, and other times it comes together in a different way. The last talk I did ended up being called Building a Resilience Network, which is what I'm stuck in the middle of at the moment. I won't say stuck. I'm right in the middle of at the moment. So I can give you a bit of an update and then tie it into the theme of solar energy and peace, which I managed to do a talk where I sort of segued from energy to peace halfway through a while ago, or it was in another meeting, and I thought, oh, okay, that works. That works. I can use that when I come to do this talk. And then yesterday, everything came together and changed in quite for me interesting ways. Yesterday afternoon, there was an online meeting with the grid, the national grid, who organize energy distribution nationally. And funnily enough, they also own the local distribution network, which used to be called Western Power Distribution. And before that, it was Southwest Electricity Board. It's now something like NGED. But anyway, it is the National Grid, NGED, National Grid Energy Distribution. That sounds about right, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But they're the National Grid as well, and they had been invited to a meeting by Regen, who are a consultancy charity who used to be called Regen Southwest, and they were based in Exeter, and they did a lot of energy planning. So they would look at what the region's capacity is for solar farms and wind farms, and they would invariably end up working quite closely. They ran an annual conference, which I've gone to for years, which is always very useful. And they would be talking to the grid about, capacity for solar in Cornwall or wind in Cornwall to get into the grid. And it's quite exciting at the moment because all the transmission capacity, loads of extra transmission capacity has been put in, but it's all to get electricity from Hinkley Point into the grid. So, but it's an interesting meeting, and who should be there as a starring first speaker, and this is a name almost out of the blue, but you'll figure it out pretty quickly, none other than our warden, Dr. Charles Gamble, wind engineer, right? And so the twin themes of this meeting were community energy divided up into wind and solar. And Charles gave a masterful talk about the wind turbine that's gone up at Avonmouth. And it was also something of a salutary lesson, because it turns out that there's a lot of work to be done to plan a wind turbine. And he was sort of showing huge spreadsheets of all the things that you have to do to get something in place. And he had helicopter view, what do they call it? A drone view of the foundations going in, which and the foundations are 100 tons of steel and 1,000 tons of concrete. And in order to lift the tower and the turbine room and the crane itself, and the turbine blades themselves, you
Mm.
have to have a crane, and it was one of the biggest in the country. And you had to dig foundations for the crane. So there were these four pads that the crane stands on. I mean, it's just a massive undertaking. And most communities can't really, and it's a bridge too far. It's a big deal. And so the second half of the meeting was in a way a little bit more relaxed, or easier for people to deal with, and for more people to interact with. And that was about putting solar, and community groups have come through the era. There was a time when the government was promoting solar energy, wanting community groups to get involved, and it brought out these incentives. The latest and biggest and longest lasting of which was called feed-in tariffs. And people would earn money from solar on their roofs if it's put on the roof. And community groups did the arithmetic, figured it out, and said, "Oh, we could raise money because the income that we will get from the feed-in tariff will be better than we'd get from a bank if we put our money into a savings account." So lots of community groups got involved in that. And there's now loads of solar on schools and solar farms and community buildings across the land. And we had a very good presentation from a guy from Share Energy about this. And at some point, I just said a few words from my group, because we seem to be, we're not able to detect yet other people who are going for what I call, the bottom end of the market, which is domestic roofs. There's lots of people being bombarded with pamphlets and leaflets and advertising saying, put solar on your roof, but it's aimed at the people who can afford to do it themselves. And the group that I'm working with, Resilience Network, was formed just over a year ago to aim at putting solar on ordinary people's roofs, and in particular in roofs in deprived areas. And we're halfway through our development process. We got 2 grants from 2 different community energy funds. One, the Bristol Community Energy Fund, which has been set up by the City Leap project. And there's a national community energy fund from Department for DEFNZ, Department for Energy, DESNZ, Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. And they have a few £1 million available over a couple of years for communities to figure out projects. And we applied for some money from this for a feasibility study. And in both cases, we can go back to apply for more money for business planning. And we're basically 6 months into the feasibility study, which I talked about, building a resilience network. And the feedback we got from our feasibility study work is aiming for 20,000 roofs is like quite a lot. And could we just look specifically at what you're wanting to do first, which is put solar on 100 roofs in a pilot on 100 roofs, 10 groups of 10 across Bristol. And the answer is, well, we can understand why you're saying that. And of course we can. We can just aim to plan for the 100 roofs at first. But our idea to put solar on people's roofs involves us working with the energy company or a energy company, because if we, the community, put solar on your roof, are you going to buy the electricity because you didn't pay for the solar, and how's that going to work? And we want it to work seamlessly and simply that, oh, you get this on your energy bill. So you join this community club, and the community club agrees to put solar on your roof. And in a way, you do own it because it's the community club that owns the solar on all the roofs. Community co-op, resilience network. And you sign up for the energy company that we're working with, and they're going to keep track of the energy that's generated, and they're going to charge you for what you use, but at a discount from what you pay for regular energy. Right? And no energy company. So we're asking the energy company to change their billing program. That's quite a big job. And no energy company is going to do that for just 100 customers. So on the one hand, we have to be ambitious to attract the energy company to do the work we need to do the project. And on the other hand, we have to be small and not too ambitious in order to not frighten the people who are lending us, who are giving us some grant funding. So we're negotiating this at the moment. And fortunately, we've done some of this before. We did a project called Lockleys Loves Solar. I did a project called Lockleys Loves Solar with a community energy company, Low Carbon Gordano, and with the lovely people at Lockleys Neighbourhood Trust, and with the fabulous people at Bristol Energy Company. And they were saying, well, we will, over time, we will change our billing program, but actually for just 100 customers, it was 300, for just a small number of customers, we can, keep track of the energy on a spreadsheet, and we'll put it in their energy bill as a manual adjustment. And so we can start sooner. So, and this is the process that you go through in a feasibility study. You're thinking, oh, we're going to have to do the billing, and we've got to have some kind of agreement for how we use the roof. We're going to have to talk to the grid about getting connections. We're going to have to sign up solar installers. And it's a bit of a jigsaw. And in fact, Resilience Network, our logo, is a jigsaw. And as I said, we're halfway through trying to do the feasibility study, and we've found two groups with projects that aim to do something like put solar on roofs and share energy between people, and in some cases do heating as well. One of them is Community Energy England, who have a grant from Innovate UK to work this out. And the other is a group called Energy Local, who are already sharing energy from a community hydro scheme between a number of users in a place called Bethesda in Wales. And they've figured out how to do the work with the energy company. So they're very important to us because they represent the project being feasible. If you just switch the power generation from a hydro scheme to a rooftop solar farm. So we're working with these people, and we're working with this lovely solar company from I can never. It's not Barnsley. It will come to me. The solar company is called Zenergy, and if I took time out, I could look up where they are. And we started talking to them right at the start of our feasibility project, and they had past experience of working with solar energy and batteries and trading the energy in a battery, using it to help the grid, buying electricity off the grid when it's cheap, selling it to the grid when the grid need electricity at peak times. So this is a very experienced company, and even with the interesting technology, they know a lot about solar panels. They've got some that are unusual shape, longer and a bit longer and a bit wider, but that give 600 watt. So with just 6 panels, you can get as much energy from a roof as the grid will let you take normally from a roof, which is 3.6 kilowatts. So just 6 panels on a roof, and you can max it out at the moment. We'd like to put more, and that's why we're talking to the grid. So this is a bit of a waffle that's saying we're coming along quite nicely. And we talked about what we're doing briefly yesterday and found quite a few people were saying, "Oh, wow, this is interesting. Can we hear more?" So we're writing up the work that we've already done, which we've already written up before. We wrote it up for Lockleys, and we're preparing a business plan, which we already did before for Lockleys. And hopefully by next spring, we will have signed up 100 people and we'll be doing a project, which is great. And where are we? Okay, 20 minutes in. That evening, I go to most evenings a Quaker meeting at 5 o'clock, which is online, and it's about peace, right? And it's about peace in Ukraine. And it's been organized by the group in America who sponsor and support Friends House Moscow. And it started off at the start of the war. It started off with quite a big group. It's now sort of about anything from 16 to 25 people of an evening. And some evenings after the meeting, we have breakout groups. And on Thursdays, I usually host a climate change breakout group. And two of the regulars weren't there, and somebody dropped in who really wanted to talk about communities. And we had this wonderful discussion for a whole hour. So, we could easily mimic that and have a discussion about communities and about communities for peace. But there are also, we talk about community energy, and we talk about, in Europe, energy communities. So community energy is when a community owns a bit of energy. An energy community is, for instance, when a whole town owns its distribution network, as is true in a city called Schönau, town called Schönau in Germany, who started off as activists who wanted to do something to become nuclear free. And they found that they couldn't become nuclear free because some of the big German energy suppliers, E.ON, for were heavily invested in nuclear energy. And so these people in Schönau ended up buying their local distribution network just so that it could be nuclear free, and ended up quite soon after. It took them years, about a dozen years, to figure out how to do it. But 3 years after they'd done it, they were overall exporting energy from Schönau to the German grid, and it was nuclear-free energy from Schönau. And it's a wonderful case study. And that's almost, let that be a lesson to you. We could be doing this in Bristol. We could be generating all our energy, and that's why we're talking about putting solar on 20,000 roofs, because once you've got something going, in the past, community groups would stop and start. You put solar on a school, and then you've done that, and then you think, oh, what do we do now? And you find a few more roofs where you want to do something, and you have to raise the money for it. So it's stop, go. And what we found talking to these people, Zenergy, they were saying, we can find renewable energy finance, industrial finance for renewable energy for you. How much solar could you install? And the discussion kind of went around the houses a little bit, but the idea was, well, as soon as you get roofs, we can get finance. All you've got to do is sign an agreement to buy the electricity that you're generating from your project. So we're thinking, okay, so that's where we need to bring in the energy company. It's the energy company that will, so you're going to get some solar on your roof funded by a renewable energy asset investment company, and you're going to use the electricity, you're going to get an energy bill from your energy company who are going to keep track of it. Here's your bill. It's less than it was 2 months ago because you've got solar on your roof now and it's cheaper. But that money they're going to collect, they're going to pass that on to us and our community energy group. And we're going to put most of that into repaying the solar, but some of it into creating, well, you've got cheaper electricity, but some of the money that you're paying for the electricity we'll put into a community energy fund, and we will be creating benefits for local communities. So that's the story that we're building up. And you can tell the story in 20 minutes. And I could now be saying, would you like solar on your roof, and signing people up. So you can imagine, the only thing missing is that we're sitting in front of our screens and we're not in a room together, and there aren't tea and cakes. But our idea is to have street parties and nice events where people learn about what's possible and sign up, and quite soon afterwards they get their solar, and quite soon after, and there's nothing to stop us with this system. There's nothing to stop us keeping going. We can have another street party, we can sign up some more people. So you just steadily build up. It isn't stop and start, it's start and build up steadily. So, and let's just remember, so the wars that we are having around the world now are about resources and control of resources, and governments wanting to own and control resources. Putin wants farmland and mineral land in Ukraine and so on. There's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of money being made. There's gas pipelines going across Ukraine, and there's gas under Ukraine. And whoever owns that, well, either you're making for a wealthy country, if your name is Norway, and you have wonderful wind and North Sea gas, and you build a sovereign energy fund, and you build a wonderful social democracy. If you're running a dictatorship, then it's money for the boys. But either way, well, Norway are doing pretty much everything they're doing in a pretty ethical way. But around the world, we're seeing wars because people can get weapons and all the rest of it. And you end up with dictatorships, and it's a horrible mess. As soon as you set the example regularly that one country need not depend on another, we don't need to be buying gas from Russia, we can be generating all our own energy in our country. If we become self-sufficient, then people stop using us. You stop having these predatory resource wars. And beyond that, there are active movements for peace. We could easily have a whole season of Quaker Talks about Quakers and their peace initiatives. So not just me saying a little bit, but in the past, I've lived in a meditation community that was specifically aimed at creating a wave of peace in America. And I was in that community for 3 years, at the end of which Gorbachev dismantled communism, and we felt, oh, something's really happening. And the same meditation group is now trying to create groups of 10,000 meditators, which is quite special. And so I ended up having had, an afternoon about community energy, which really brought me up to date on my project. And just telling you about that afternoon tells you where we are. We're in a business planning phase, and in 6 months, during this time, we will start to have community meetings and sign people up for solar. And we hope to nail down, oh yeah, this group Zenergy, who we talked to, who could raise the finance, came back to us 2 months ago and said, well, we've squared the circle. We thought it was interesting that you were talking about putting solar on ordinary people's roofs, which is kind of hard for us to do as a company. But what we've done, we've found a housing association who would like solar energy. And they put together a deal, and they've got a lovely presentation about it, where they can finance the solar on people's roofs. They will put it in with batteries, so people are getting energy during the day and during the night. The people don't actually pay their own energy bill. The housing association handles that. And I think that's quite common for housing association. You just pay one bill, which is your rent, and it includes the energy. And so all of that's being sort of sorted out by nevertheless, you do have a meter or a smart meter, because they're going to be tracking your energy use, because your housing association does have to pay for the energy that you're using. So suddenly our friends at Zenergy came to us and said, oh, we've worked out a deal with an energy supply company. And they call it end-to-end finance, because they're bringing in the capital finance, and they're working with you or your housing association to get the energy bill paid, and they're paying off the capital that was brought in to pay for the solar. And overall, this group is generating its own energy, emitting less carbon, people's energy bills are lower, and it's contributing to the country's targets to reduce emissions. Everybody wins. And basically, well, I'm friends with a university researcher, and I met him the day after we heard this, and he said, well, you're not doing a feasibility study anymore then, because if there's a commercial deal you can get that includes all the things that you're studying the feasibility of, that demonstrates it's feasible. And he actually said, being a university researcher, he's got a scale, an academic scale of feasibility, right? And up to here, you're doing feasibility studies. At this point, it's feasible. And it being out there being traded as a regular business is beyond feasibility. Yeah. You're on to the next stage. So we went back to our funders, and they said, oh, yeah, that's interesting. Well, yes. Well, you better write up. We did give you a grant, so you'd better write up your feasibility study. And then they came back and said, well, we've still got some questions. And before we give you the next grant, we have got questions that we would want answered. But if we play our cards right and we tell our story properly, we've got a way of providing energy to people. And communities can sort of take a breather a bit. We will be more self-sufficient in our communities. I hope we will be more peaceful in our communities. We are seeing a wave of, recently we had this wave of, bigotry and around the time of the election, with riots and so on. And we're getting a bit of a mini wave of stabbings, which seem to be at least partially racially motivated. So the topic of peace isn't just about world peace. It's not just about stopping what's going on in Gaza or in Ukraine. It's about creating peace in our own communities. And I think if we make communities that are more robust, being working together more to create their own energy and to make themselves more resilient, then that's a good thing. Now, this morning I woke up with some more thoughts, and a series of pictures and cartoons came up. But I think this is a good point for me to um, shut up and see what's coming up for you, what your thoughts are about energy, peace, what questions you might have, what reflections you might have.
I want to ask, are we yet at the stage where somebody without any money can put her hand up and agree that she would like to have, to get involved in this, having something on her roof? Are we yet at that stage or not quite?
That's exactly precisely where we are trying to head. And funnily enough, at yesterday's meeting with the grid, they were saying that the government are holding internal meetings at the moment. They have announced that they're going to be creating a UK energy, is it? That we're going to be generating our own power, and that they want to be investing 400 million a year in community energy. Well, as far as we can tell, there's only been about 300 million invested in toto. It's a number off the top of my head, but the communities have about 300 megawatts of energy, and the government wants to lend enough money for all of that again every year to the community. And communities don't understand what this deal looks like yet. Ed Miliband spoke in Parliament this week or last week about the wonderful work happening in Lawrence Weston with Community Wind. And then Charles spoke this week and said it's really hard work, actually, planning a wind turbine. It's not going to be easy to have wind turbines all over the place. And we're going, please, sir, we've noticed that there's roofs all over the place that haven't got solar on them. And people who have got money, even people who have got money, are a little bit, shall we say, reluctant to just jump in because, there may be better deals available next year or whatever. And people who haven't got money are saying, well, I don't know what I'm not even getting my winter fuel tax, whatever. And we're saying, no, it should be possible for communities to organize to do this. So we're as far as we know, Patsy, there are not large numbers of groups doing this. There's a Solar Streets group in Sheffield. There's a group called Power Station in Walthamstow, who are organizing artistic and other campaigns to raise money to give people solar. And we're saying, even if a council does it or a housing association does it, it doesn't bring the energy to everybody. Maybe the government can figure it out, but the government is saying they want communities to own their own energy. And energy communities in Europe are just that. They're communities saying, we want to own our own power supply. We want to feel self-sufficient, that we're contributing to global warming. We sort of don't trust, as we saw, there used to be affordable housing, and then Right to Buy came out, and some people made money buying their houses, but by and large, the amount of genuinely affordable housing went down, and the energy supply was sold off, and it was going to be more efficient. But what it turns out to be is it's efficient in delivering profits to the people who own the franchises. And so people have learned that lesson. And thank God the new government is coming back in and saying, we think we might just cancel Right to Buy so that councils can start building truly affordable housing again. And we're going to allow for community-owned energy so that communities won't live in fear that the people who own their energy supply are just trying to make as much profit as possible. We'd like to put it in the hands of community so that the community is saying, we want your energy to be as cheap as possible. And it will be one price where we're paying off the finance. But once the finance is paid off, the energy will be cheaper still.
I have.
But it seems to me, David, that the first thing you've got to do is to have the legal overframing. It can't be this one does that, that one does that, the other does that. That is a recipe, in my opinion, for the rich to get richer and ordinary people tough. You know, you've got to have coherence. I mean, I think Co-op Energy is quite a powerful organization, and there was something called, well, I get my energy from Ecotricity. I mean, Dale Vance, I don't know what he's doing now, but it seems to me the English problem, it seems to me, is little projects here, there, and everywhere. Whereas it seems to me you've got to have a legal framework that is carefully put in place, that when the Tories next get into to power, as they will do, they can't bugger it up. That seems to me to be the English problem. I think it's better in Wales. Some of my family live in Wales, and it does seem to be better coherence in national policies. In Scotland, I don't know about, but I know a little bit about Wales. So it's the legal framework, it seems to me, is absolutely critical.
Well, Angela, I believe you are absolutely right. I come across this problem before when first putting some solar up in Lockleys on ordinary people's roofs, and there was a legal framework that was agreed by the Council of Mortgage Lenders, where a householder or the owner of a house could lease out the rights to the use of their roof. And it was called a roof lease. And communities then could negotiate with householders to use their roof so that they had the right to put solar on it and generate from it and collect the feed-in tariff. And in exchange for the roof lease, the community would give back to the householder, you can have the electricity for free.
My brother can do that in Kent because he lives in the Romney Marsh. He's got his own house, you know, in the middle of nowhere, and he does have the right kind of solar panels, because I know when he was installing them, he went to great lengths. There are some solar panels are better than others. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but there are different issues that he had to deal with. And yes, they pay him.
Yeah. So the problem that you're describing, which is that we could well be being revert to being ripped off. It's not reverting because we're still being we're still victims of a privatized energy system, which is being run for maximum profit and not run as a public service or public utility. It is to be hoped that the government will legislate intelligently to do these things. At the moment, Ed Miliband has got people sitting in back rooms thinking about this while they're looking at, are we going to cancel Wilfer? Are we going to have more nuclear power or less? I think Ed Miliband understands that by the time you would build a new nuclear power station, we could have all the wind and solar that we need in place already, delivering energy cheaper than nuclear power stations do. So there's some fancy footwork being done as the new government comes in. It's sort of like, give them a break. They're only just in. They've got to do a bit of thinking. They've got to, you can't turn the ship of state in a moment. But meanwhile, the remedies do exist. And our group has been talking with there are things about roof leases that if they're written properly, then they can be very friendly and not at all adversarial. If your solar was provided by, in the early days of roof leases and feed-in tariffs, British Gas gave away a lot of free energy, as it were, made a fortune, by putting solar on people's roofs using their installer crews and everything, and collecting the feed-in tariffs. And at the end of the year, that first year, I heard a British Gas strategy manager say very clearly that they had made a lot of money out of this deal with the government. They had the government was paying very, very well to bootstrap rooftop solar. And we all learned from this. And we're talking with a very good solicitor about something more like a rental scheme. It would be a simpler arrangement. It wouldn't impact mortgages and so on. And we will start off with the best form of words that we can come up with as an agreement between the community energy co-op and the house owner, who may not be the energy user. If you're in social accommodation, we may have why would a house owner even work with a community energy group just to get their tenants cheaper energy? Well, putting solar on the roof upgrades the environmental quality of the house. So that is good for the land. So we're thinking about all these things, and you go to a meeting and there's lots and lots and lots of people with well-considered questions like yours and Patsy's, and you have to answer them fresh every time because it's a new audience. But it puts our attention on having the best answers and communicating them, well and convincingly. So
2
that
points.
Say yes, I want it, Ray.
2 points, David. I'd be interested in. One is it was mentioned about right to buy type of things that they've stopped doing it in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. England is the only one at the moment who still does it. And as reforms to that were not in the quotes King's speech, don't hold your breath for it in this parliament. The other one to that is, where will you get your solar panels from?
Okay, well, the focus of the talk isn't on housing, although it's absolutely well mixed in the idea of resilience network. The solar project I'm working on with Resilience Network, we want communities to be overall more resilient. We want people to have nicer, more affordable housing and all the rest of it. And we will work with communities to help them be more resilient. So whatever legislation changes, and you're right, Ray, whatever the government might do to make it easier for councils to provide or not provide affordable housing, there are community groups working on this. So there's Bristol's Tiny House Community has got an arrangement with the council where they've got some land on the strength of a commitment to make housing on it affordable in perpetuity. So, the agreement with it isn't, well, builder, like some self-build projects, you've got a deal where you got the land cheap and you built your house and you made a capital gain. This would be the group gets some land, builds some housing, and it keeps it affordable forever. So that's there are all sorts of ways of doing that, and we certainly need to rethink what's gone wrong in the past. But I was employed by Connolly and Callaghan in Stokes Croft, who are a provider of homeless housing, because they were concerned that there were not routes out of homelessness. And so we were looking at what legislation we need. We were looking at what councils could do, but we were also looking at what communities and private housing providers could do to make housing more affordable. The other part of the question, what was the other part of the question, Ray? You came back to energy.
Where are your solar panels coming
of course,
from?
Yeah. Where do the panels come from? Well, they come from The vast majority of the world's solar panels are being built in China at the moment. And the vast majority of the world's solar panels are being installed in China as well. But in China and in other countries, in America, it has just happened that the number of cars has gone up in the last year, and the amount of fossil fuel being sold has gone down. Now, what that means is the balance of electric cars is increasing. But it's linked with the generation. You can't sell electric cars unless you can make it. And what's also happening is that in China, emissions are going down as well. So it's not just the proportion of electric vehicles on the roads is increasing, the proportion of electricity that's going into the cars is increasing. And other countries are electing tariff barriers and starting to build their own panels. Behind the scenes, there's a big debate about the sustainability or otherwise of the solar panels that are being made. But it turns out that there's more solar panels being built than installed because China and around the world has the same problem. Most of the solar panels are going into massive, supermassive solar farms, and the roadblock is grid connections, not solar panel production. So there's more solar panels around than on it. So there's a glut of solar panels on the market, which is good for anybody who wants to put solar panels on domestic roofs. We're saying we don't need a grid connection, we just need a roof, right? And if there's a glut of solar panels, what that means is the tendency for the solar panels to be more affordable rather than less affordable. So the solar panels are going to come from wherever they are at a good price. And there's all sorts of innovations happening. When we put solar panels on in Lockleys 10 years ago, the average panel size was 250 watts. And that was big because it had been 200 watts. Now you can get 400 and 500 watt panels, and the latest are 600 watt panels, and they get that by making the panel slightly larger. But that means that just 6 panels on a roof will give as much energy as the grid will let you put on a roof. Actually, they're more concerned about what comes out of your inverter. You can put more on the roof if you've got a battery. But yeah, so the answer is that the panels will come from wherever we can source them ethically at a good price, Ray. If that makes sense and is fair enough. What was your concern?
The concern there is that China still, in a lot of cases, doesn't have a good rap at the moment. I know it's the biggest concern, and I know that they produce lots of other type of stuff as well. So solar panels are still a byproduct than they make at the moment. But do you see any concern from any other countries that giving China the majority of sales could produce negative results from some countries and some groups within Britain today?
Well, yes. It's world trade is glory and a problem. Where we use trade, where we exploit people in third world countries for minerals and so on, is not good. Where we pollute by failing to recycle and reuse properly is not good. There's all sorts of things going wrong in supply chains. There's a positive answer about solar, which is a relative answer, which is that if you put solar panels on a roof, you can see how relatively small they are. There's some glass in there, there's some aluminium, there's some silicon and electronics. During their lifetime, they will save as much energy as if the entire house was made of solid coal and you burnt the whole thing to make electricity, right? So a thin veneer of solar on the roof of a house can eliminate as much pollution as would be created by burning the whole house's weight and turning it to carbon dioxide. So relatively speaking, it's like a mobile phone, right? They're being made with recycled materials, and there's much, much, much less material in this than there is in a desktop computer. And similarly, you could look at a car that's an electric car and an internal combustion engine car and say, well, there's the same materials going into each. It's the same thing, isn't it? And you say, yeah, but an internal combustion engine car burns its weight in petrol quite a few times in its lifetime, and an electric car doesn't do that ever. So the comparison of renewable technologies with the old technologies is quite dramatic when you look at the amount of emissions and extraction of minerals that is eliminated. But you think, well, you're still getting metal out of the ground for a car. Yeah, but you're not getting petrol out of the ground at all. And that's the big shift. And you're not pumping it into the atmosphere as pollution. So yeah, all these issues. I mean, they're incredibly fair points, Ray.
Can I? Oh, sorry, Ray.
Did you want to say something, Angela? I know you have your finger up again.
Well, yeah, I'm still on about roofs, actually. I mean, will any roof do? I live in a house that's over 100 years old. It's a small terrace. It's got a good roof that looks okay to me, but will any old roof do? Or can it face any way?
That's lovely. That's lovely. In the very first instance, when we first put solar in Lockleys, we were told, well, only south-facing roofs. You got to catch the sun, right? And we found some houses that didn't have south-facing roofs. They had east and west. And we thought, well, we're a group. We can run an experiment. Don't have to get maximum from everything. And we put solar on some east and west facing roofs. And funnily enough, if you've got north and south, then you can only use half your roof, the south facing bit. If you've got east and west, you've got twice as much space, even if it's only producing 80% as much electricity. And we found we were getting 90% doing east and west. And quite nicely, the east facing bit is giving you a morning blip as the sun rises, right? So, and now solar panels are so affordable that solar panels don't work on direct sunlight; they work on light, right? And you can put solar on a north-facing roof and still get a fair chunk of electricity out of it. And that's a beautiful question about your roof. You may not have a roof that's suitable for solar, but Bristol's got a load of roofs. So there's a stage one, which is solar on your roof, you getting the electricity from it. What you don't get is exported. And we're saying, hang on. That exported electricity, couldn't we be capturing that and piping it to people who haven't got suitable roofs for solar? Right. And what we found in 2012 in Lockleys was the maximum you're allowed to put on a roof was 3.68 kilowatts. On average, we put 2.7 kilowatts on the roofs. And I went to an event where there was this guy talking about his research, and he'd been the guy who'd installed our meters, and he was talking about my project and giving results I didn't even know about, which is amazing. And he's saying, on average, these solar panels on these houses are generating as much electricity as these houses use in a year, just at the wrong time. And it's not covering the gas heating as well. Well, now, instead of 250 watt panels, we're talking about 500 and 600 watts. So you're talking about being able to put on a roof, including its north facing part, twice as much solar energy from the same area of panels. So not just all the electricity you use in the year, but enough electricity to handle your heating, enough electricity to power your car. And somebody has just noticed that Tesla cars, the ones that are being manufactured now, have two-way batteries. The battery can be charged by the house, but the battery can provide energy to the house.
Yeah.
And so then you're talking about not needing to go and buy extra batteries. You could have roofs covered with solar down a street, and you could have a carpool that owns electric cars that have got loads of storage in them, and your daytime generation is charging up a bank of cars whose batteries are used to power your houses at night, or for a little bit of shopping, an occasional long trip. But mostly, if you've absolutely filled an electric car's battery every day, you certainly wouldn't use the capacity for most of them most of the time. So having an excess of electric car batteries, you end up with a community that has rewired itself. And there's some other work to be done. You take your excess summer solar and you turn that into hydrogen gas. And this is already having to be done for wind farms, because we will soon have more wind than we use energy. The same will be true for solar as well. So you have to store it, and you have to store it long term. But that was always going to be what you needed to do anyway. That you need, you grow crops and you store them so that you've got food for the winter. We had fossil energy, so we didn't need to make energy in the summer that we could use in the winter, but we can do that. We can think to do that by storing energy long term as well as short term.
Thank you.
Any last questions or thoughts?
You spoke about the government being involved in all this, and wanted to do the development. And because I'm a cynical old leader, I fear the government might want some big energy firm to take control of it all, and therefore get more of the money out of it.
Well, you are absolutely right. The government has declared way up front that it wants a massive energy firm to take control of it all, but it's a government energy firm, not a private one. We're setting up UK Energy to handle as much of the UK's renewable energy generation as possible, but the government is also committing to support community energy with huge amounts of money, which my project has shown that we don't need. We can get regular commercial finance, and ultimately there's more than enough money this is the right place to get the money. There's more than enough money in the country's pension funds to pay for all the work needed to be done to completely decarbonize our economy. So we, the people, could own the means of saving ourselves from global warming. And that debate you don't see that clearly put in the newspaper, because anytime Labour say anything, you have this mass of braying media barking and shouting at them. The whole range of them say, "Oh, they're doing this, they're doing that. Oh, this minister's saying that they're going to end right to buy, and they made £40,000 on their own flat when they bought it. How's that for sinners?" And you think, oh, for pity's sake. All sorts of really crazy things got done to us by a rapacious government, and funded by the what would you call it, the special interest groups and lobbyists. And I think you have a government coming in that says, thank goodness we are going to be able to restore the idea of government as a form of service.
I like that idea.
My thought is give them a chance. Don't start saying you're not doing it while we're living with the legacy of the last government, which definitely wasn't doing it. And let's see if these guys can turn it round.
The first few words you used there was "we the people." That was the first few words of the American Declaration of Independence, which I thought was slightly ironic. But
well, we've seen things go wrong over there, and let's hope that they have the nous to put them right.
So, elect Camilla, that's what I say. Next week, we have the joys of Patsy, and her title, which I jolly well like, is Growing Up with Poetry, and what poetry enthralled her when she grew up. Enthralled her, even. See, can't pronounce my words this morning. Enthralled her as she grew up. An interesting subject, I think.
And I'm hoping that other people will also bring poetry that enthralled them as they were growing up as well, if possible.
Lovely.
That would be great anyway.
The magic of words. Look forward to it, Patsy.
Good. Wow. Thank you very much, David, for your interesting talk, as always. And we hope, as that phrase goes in most Quaker meetings, we hope to come together next week on the 20th of September. The year's going like that. Anyway, thank you, friends, and I will see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.